Hey everybody, welcome back to the Choose Hope podcast. Today I'm Jesse Mizell, and today we are here with Jody Smith again, who is expert on nutrition relating to cancer, and we're going to talk a little bit about the foundations of what makes a good diet for somebody dealing with cancer. So
I'm so excited. Thank you, Jesse. It's really exciting to share with you. I've had about 45 years of experience in this, so I feel like I have kind of been there, and I've come up with some, I think, really strong foundational basics. So for those of you that are choosing hope, I love the title of this broadcast because what I want to bring to you today is the hope that you can make a difference by choosing good nutrition.
Awesome.
So foundational basics. Let's go back just for a second and talk a little bit about what statistics show us.
Okay.
There are statistics that tell us if we're overweight, that can be a huge risk factor for a whole list of cancers. I won't list them all out, but now there's like 14 cancers, and it's, breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer. It just goes down. Stomach cancers, even melanoma is in that list of what is affected by being overweight.
Wow.
So what we eat obviously is going to affect whether or not we're overweight. And that has to do with how many fat cells we have turning around. Then we have all of the foundation of what foods actually can contribute towards cancer. And I don't say cause cancer, they just contribute.
Okay.
So we want to talk about specific what kinds of foods do we eat and how do we lose weight in a way that will help our own immune system, because remember, our immune system is our secret, that is our secret projectile missile. That is our secret hope. I love that. Choose hope. Our secret hope that our own body will kill those cancer cells as well. And I love talking about that because it's just amazing what God has given us in the food that he has given and how it works inside our body.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So let's start with real, true nutrition. What do you eat? What should your diet look like? And again, we could get into lots and lots of data and statistics, but I think I'll leave that for people. If they want more information, they can, click on some links and stuff like that. But when people say, Jody, what do I eat? I have cancer. I don't know what to do. The doctors don't really have much to tell me. Dietitians are talking to me about if I'm nauseous and that kind of stuff, but I don't know what to eat every day. Number one, most important factor for eating with cancer is you need more vegetables. That's easy.
Really? Okay.
It's foundational. We know that if we will eat 7 servings, don't panic, sounds like it's a ton, but 7 servings, a serving is a half a cup if it's chunky, like broccoli, cauliflower.
Okay.
It's a cup if it's leafy, like lettuce. If you will eat 7 servings, and I'll tell you how to break that down, it will lower your cancer risk by 50%.
Really? Wow.
I mean, that's stunning. It'll lower your heart disease risk and your diabetes risk by that as well. Okay. So, a lot of times we have multiple issues going on. Somebody didn't just have cancer, they got cancer and diabetes or cancer and heart disease. So that alone is just stunning. How do you do that? Because we're talking about, everybody pictures in their mind as I say this, this mound of vegetables that looks unedible.
Right.
But the way that I do that, I have a little system in my own brain because I told you on my last podcast, this is very real to me. This is my husband who is a stage 4 cancer survivor. When I say this, I'm talking about, my own family every day, the risk for my children because their dad had melanoma, things like that. So every lunch, I tell people, I should have brought a baggie, but one of the sandwich-sized baggies, that is a cup and a half if you have chunky vegetables in that.
Okay.
So that's 3 servings. So I think every lunch, 3 servings of raw vegetables, 1 baggie. Have those with hummus. You could have a salad. You could do all kinds of things, but that's not so much, right? You could eat a baggie of veggies at lunch.
Yeah.
And then for dinner, I plan every dinner meal around 2 cooked, which could be a baked potato and steamed asparagus. Okay. It could be a stir fry. It could be, just fill in the blank, any kind of casserole to have veggies. 2 servings, 1 cup. Okay. That's not that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 2 servings of raw vegetables, and that's some kind of salad. Salad is a loose word in my in my mentality, because it could be veggies, just, individual veggies. It could be a lettuce salad, could be a spinach salad, could be a broccoli salad, could be coleslaw. You can just go on and on. That's 7. And that doesn't even count a thing for breakfast.
Right,
Maybe you had a wonderful omelet.
Right. Yeah.
Real food that comes from the ground.
Okay.
I love, love, love that scripture says that every tree which yields a seed and it drops on the ground and it grows, that's what God gave us for food.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, one of the things I tell Dan all the time, because he's visual, most of us are visual. When you look at your plate, I want to see half that plate in vegetables.
Okay.
Not that hard, not that hard. And we can do that with a whole variety of vegetables. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples of why this is so critically important. So there's a whole group of vegetables called the cruciferous vegetables.
Okay.
And those are like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, arugula, Brussels sprouts. I'm missing several in that whole family. Bok choy, Napa cabbage, all that family helps our body handle what we call xenoestrogens. And those are estrogens in our environment. For example, new carpet, you know how it smells? That produces what we call xenoestrogens. They act like estrogens in our body, and that can be super big as far as cancer. Okay, that doesn't mean you don't ever put in new carpet, because your body can handle that. But it may be the scents from candles. It may be sugar. Sugar produces xenoestrogens. And then obviously some people have imbalances with hormones in their own body, because birth control pills, all different kinds of things that can contribute as well. But guess what? All of that family helps your body handle that. And so in a form of cancer, it's super important. So I tell people, especially if they have breast cancer, prostate cancer, any of the hormonal types of cancers, 1 to 2 servings of those cruciferous vegetables a day. There's a lot of them. Most people have never even tried, half of what's in that family. So I teach them how to prepare it and how to use it. And we can make some recipes and things like that available. But that's one family. Another vegetable, beets. I know people go, beets, oh, gross, I hate beets. And they say that because the only beet they've ever had is out of some can. Or some baby food thing they were trying to feed their kid, and they thought they were fruit or something. But beets are a liver detoxifier. And what they do is they cause the liver to dump bile. And once it dumps that bile out, let's say you're getting chemo or you're getting, even radiation, that's all filtered through your liver, because your liver is like the oil filter of a car. So you dump that bile, and that's like getting an oil change. In your car, what happens after you change the oil when it's all gooked up and messy? The car runs much better, right?
So that probably wouldn't be something you would do every day, or
no. But as you learn how to do beets, and you learn how to eat them, and you try some yummy, yummy beets. Beets taste like carrots. If you've never had a raw beet, you probably I used to do all these different demos in grocery stores and stuff, and so one of the things I would try to get people to do is try raw beets. I practically had to knock them down, sit on them, and cram them in their mouth. But if I could get them to taste it, their first thing was like, oh, wow, this is sweet. What do we get from beets? Sugar. Beets are sweet. Beets have carrot-like tendencies. So raw beets could be one way. I'd love to do all different kinds of ways to do beets, but that's just one example, one food. Each food has its own separate benefit. Another one I love to talk about is eggplant. And in America, every eggplant recipe tells you to peel off all that purple. It's the most unusual color. Can you think of anything else that color? It's so weird. People call it purple, but it's really almost blackish. I love it to wear that color. Always look for that color. But that eggplant is very unique in its color. And inside that skin of that eggplant is something that causes cancer cells, causes something called apoptosis. And what that means is cancer cells kill themselves. They destroy their own cells. And I love that, because that's food. And now they're trying to take that purple in the eggplant and figure out how they can put it in the pills, so you can take it. Wouldn't it be interesting if we just maybe ate some eggplant? And it goes on and on. Things like beta carotenes. That's the color orange and yellow and dark green, spinach, carrots, squash. That beta carotene turns into vitamin A into your body. Our body has the ability to take that and shift it. Vitamin A is an infection fighter.
Okay.
When your immune system is compromised because you're taking chemo to try to kill off all those bad cells, then you've got to keep your immune system strong in other ways. And so, for example, that beta carotene is incredibly beneficial for helping all the mucous membranes, colds, flus, all that kind of thing. And again, lots and lots of those vegetables out there people don't eat. One I love to talk about, I could do this all day, but I promise I won't keep going on and on. But I want you to get the whole vegetable idea.
Yeah, that's
parsley
great.
And cilantro.
Okay.
Now, if you don't have the cilantro gene, my husband does not. He'd rather die than eat cilantro. I have a couple members of my family. If you have the gene, you like it. If you don't have the gene, it tastes like soap or worse. But cilantro is able to act like a magnet, and it pulls heavy metals. It helps to chelate, pulls heavy metals out of the body and gets rid of them naturally.
Wow.
Amazing.
That is amazing.
Parsley helps to build hemoglobin. One of the things that happens lots of times with people when they're, going through cancer treatment is they get anemic and their hemoglobin goes down. Well, chlorophyll in green leafies, it also can act like a chelating agent, but it has this really high amount of chlorophyll. It freshens your breath. If you eat garlic, what do? Chew on that little parsley that's on your plate, and it'll freshen your breath better than even gum. So it takes stuff out. It pulls stuff out.
Interesting.
And who eats parsley, right?
Yeah.
But I can tell you some ways you can do it, some really exciting ways. And I have a word that I use, and it's called vegify.
Okay.
So I take a recipe or something you're eating and say, how can we vegify it? What can we add? And you have little children. When my kids were little, they went through times where they would refuse to eat vegetables.
Right.
Oh boy, let me tell you how many ways I can hide a vegetable. They would eat carbs, they would eat muffins, they would eat pancakes, they would eat waffles, and I would go nuts, chock fulling them of all kinds of vegetables that they wouldn't eat if I gave them the veggies. So we can find all kinds of ways to get those vegetables in, but 7 servings a day.
Okay.
That's always our goal.
And what is a serving again?
Half a cup if it's chunky, a cup if it's leafy.
Okay.
And spread it out through the day, because obviously you want. Now, the other great thing about vegetables is you're probably not going to get fat eating vegetables, right? And when half your plate is veggies, you're naturally lower in calories. And even if you're eating, people say, well, I can't have potatoes, I can't have sweet potatoes. Yes, you can. Everything is in balance and everything is in moderation. But all those vegetables have value and benefit. And during the potato famine, I didn't see too many heavy people from Ireland. They were all skinny. There's a lot of things that we have kind of bought into that aren't necessarily true. So first, foundational principle of good nutrition in cancer is eat 7 servings of vegetables a day. And sometimes that takes time, to get there. It doesn't happen in a minute. You got to be purposeful. You have to be intentional. All kinds of ways to help you do that. But that's foundational. The next thing, because I like to focus on what we do, not what we don't do. Okay. So the next thing is let's eat whole grains and not refined grains. Let me define that.
Okay.
If I were to have a little teensy, you wouldn't even be able to see it on camera, but a little teensy kernel of wheat, whole wheat, just a whole wheat kernel right off the shock of wheat. Inside that teensy tiny little kernel are 42 vitamins and minerals.
Wow.
One of my first questions, God, how'd you do that? How'd you get those in there? If I had a kernel of brown rice, there are 40 in brown rice.
Okay.
But guess what happens when you strip that down to white? If you go to white flour or white rice, there's a big fat 0.
Oh, wow.
0.
Interesting.
So all that good nutrition is lost.
Okay.
And the great thing about that is it lasts longer on the shelf. You can make more money. People seem to like it better because it doesn't taste like much. You can make it taste like anything. But guess what? Mice don't even want to eat it. So we've got to go back to eating the real thing. And there are lots of grains. If you've never had quinoa, it's delicious. And it's the only grain that's a complete protein. There's millet, there's amaranth, there's triticale, there's spelt. Spelt is my favorite. You know what I got for Christmas? 50 pounds of spelt flour. I was so excited.
I've never even heard of that.
Spelt
before.
is also called einhorn, and it's an ancient grain. It was found in King Tut's tomb.
Okay.
And it's in the wheat family, so it does have gluten. If you're gluten sensitive, we have to be careful. But because it's an ancient grain, it's not GMO. You know, it's not genetically modified. It's the real McCoy, you know, way back to the olden days.
Wow.
And my tummy likes it. So different people, you know, different things work better.
Yeah.
But I love spelt. And now I can make so many different things, you know, with the spelt. And it was grown right in Indiana, right up in northern Indiana, and processed there. It's kind of cool to be close to home.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I love to eat, you know, close to home, farm to table, seasonably, you know, that kind of thing. So whole grains are critical for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
Fiber is massively important for many types of cancer. You know, we know with colorectal cancer in Africa and places where they have really high fiber intake, because that's all they got.
Right.
They don't get colorectal cancer. They don't get colon cancers and all the stomach cancers. It's just non-existent.
Interesting. Okay.
And there are two types of fiber. There's soluble fiber that acts like a sponge, sops up and absorbs. I should have my sponge and my broom here, but anyway, I show those oftentimes in classes. But you know, if I poured oil on this table, I'm not going to use a broom, right? You know, I'm going to get a sponge, I'm going to sop it up,
right.
Then I'm going to get my broom and sweep it off, you know, sweep it off the table. So one sops and one gets out.
Okay.
Now, I promise I'm not going to do a poop class today, but I could. It's really critical thinking about how our digestive system and how our elimination system works. Because can you imagine having meat? Let's just take a big, juicy steak at 98.6 for about 3 days. Kind of gross, huh?
Very gross.
Very gross. Everybody immediately goes there when you give that example.
Right.
But that's what happens to so many people. Because they don't have any fiber, they're not going to the bathroom.
So
they're not getting things out.
Okay.
It's just sitting there and it's fermenting and it's going bad and it's releasing all this crud into your system. So we've got to get things in and out. And then that sponge is pulling a lot of gook off your colon wall. The broom is sweeping it out of there, sweeping it off that wall. Because when you're taking chemo, you know, the great thing about chemo is it's killing the cancer cells. The bad thing about chemo is kind of what it does to us personally, you know, what you have to deal with as a result of that. And so there's heavy metals, there's all kinds of things they use as chemo agents, you know, to pull that crud out. So that fiber becomes massively critical. And it also helps, you know, just food and too much fat or too much sugar or, you know, those kinds of things. It helps get that out of there. So grains are a great source if and only if you're eating whole grain.
Right.
If you're eating refined grain, big problem. And with refined grain usually comes sugar.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I just think of cereal and it seems
think of donuts, think of white bread, think of, you know, every kind of pastry, every kind of dessert, every kind of cookie. You know, you have to make a really conscious effort to change that.
Right.
And to try to be sure you get a variety of grains.
Well, I like what you said about focusing on the things to do rather than not do.
Yep.
There's this whole list already of what you just talked about of foods that are great. And so let's focus on that instead
That's right. And
make,
you know, one of the things I say all the time is small changes yield really big results. And sometimes when I would do a speaking engagement, a wife would come home and throw everything away and her husband would be furious. You know what I mean? What'd you do with all that food? What's going on? You know, we don't have to do everything at once. The problem when someone actually has cancer, they don't have as much leeway there. You know, they got to make some pretty big changes quickly to make enough difference. But for most of us, and you know, maybe you're the caregiver and your person you're taking care of, your husband, your family member, whatever, isn't so attuned to this, start small. You know, start with, hey, what vegetables do you like? Let's just eat more of those. You know, everybody loves things out of the garden. Everybody loves, you know, certain vegetables, certain times. Focus on what we already like, what already sounds good, what already tastes good. And then again, I love to give creative solutions. And what I do in my cooking classes, I let you taste it. Because if you'll see me make it and you'll taste it, and it tastes good to you, then you'll use it.
Yeah.
You'll do it again.
Yeah.
And I cook for real people. I have 5 kids. I have 17 grandchildren.
That's
And
awesome.
I'm talking about real food for real people.
Yeah.
And it can be done.
Well, and I would imagine chemo and some of the different treatments can probably mess with your taste, mess with
it does.
A lot of
and
that
we
stuff.
We can help you with that. Some people listening are in survivorship. They've made it through their treatment. Some people are in the midst of treatment. We do things differently. I have lots and lots of smoothies and secret tricks for getting good nutrition when you don't even feel like you can eat. And that's not the time, where we want to be super focused on, oh my gosh, I can't do anything.
Right.
We want to say, what can I do? And we can get into some of those areas as well.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
The foundation of good nutrition to prevent and to focus on how our body can work better. These are the first 2 steps. There are only 2 steps. I know we're going to run out of time. We can add 2 more steps in the next podcast. But if you work on that, think about every color and every kind, because every color of food has anti-inflammatory components. Okay. And if I say inflammation, think pain. And whenever I ask anybody, is anybody in pain anywhere? Every hand goes up. Oh yeah, somewhere I hurt, But anti-inflammatories help to reduce that. And that's in the color. Every kind has antioxidants. Antioxidants stop cell damage 1 cell at a time. Oxidative damage breaks our body down 1 cell at a time. So fruits and vegetables, we didn't really talk about fruit, but we're going to get there. Vegetables are foundational, and then we'll talk about fruit. But every color, every kind is critical. Then you get to the 7 servings of veggies, and again, we'll come back and talk about fruit.
So basically trying to have just a mix of
all colors, all kinds, and rainbow, the beautiful rainbow plate. You want to look at your plate. You don't want to just see white or red or green or whatever. So that's really important. Variety is paramount. And the same is true with grains. We want a variety. We have gluten-containing grains, and if you're not sensitive to gluten, you don't have to be careful with that. Well, that would include rye and barley and triticale and spelt and kamut. Those are all, and wheat, those are all gluten-containing grains. Now, sometimes when people have gone through chemo, it's kind of wrecked their gut, and they can't really tolerate gluten as well. A lot of docs are, checking for that, or maybe they were gluten sensitive their whole lives and they never knew it. That's a protein component of the wheat. So, but all those grains have lots and lots of that insoluble fiber, the broom fiber. And then you have other grains like brown rice and quinoa and amaranth and millet. Those kinds of grains are wonderful for that soluble fiber, that broom fiber. So we need the grains. They give high quality complex carbohydrates. You're an athlete, complex carbohydrates are going to give you the long burn.
Right.
You're going to be able to burn those for a long period of time, and that's going to give you kind of a foundation of nutrition for calories. Some of us need less, me. Some of us need more, and I have to work with that with my husband too, because what he needs and what I need are very different. So that's where whole grains and complex carbs can be, individualized based on the person. But the key is no matter what, no matter how much you get, no matter what you have to do as far as amount, whole grains only, no refined grains. And that, again, is one of the huge risk factors is processed foods. And white flour, white rice, all of those are processed foods. And we know that that is a contributor towards cancer. And this will help, with your risk. So first 2 steps.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. We will be doing more of these. We hope you found some information that's helpful. If you have any questions, let us know. We're going to be constantly trying to post, more information and things that we think will be good for you. So thank you, Jody. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you next time.